Imagine standing before thousands of spectators, thirsty for blood and glory, surrounded by cheers echoing throughout the amphitheater. Every fight could be your last. Now imagine facing that fate without any chest protection, relying solely on your agility and courage. This was Tetráites, the gladiator who defied death and became a legend. In the heart of Pompeii, long before its tragic end, gladiatorial spectacles were the soul of the city. Men fought not only for survival, but for fame and freedom. And among them, Tetráites stood out as one of the boldest combatants of his time. His rivalry with Prudes not only ignited the arenas, but transcended centuries, recorded in inscriptions, paintings, and even artifacts found far from the Roman Empire. But who, after all, was this fearless gladiator? How did he achieve such notoriety? And what was his true fate? In this video, you will discover the entire trajectory of Tetráites, his victories, challenges, and the impact he left forever on the history of gladiators. Now, before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you're subscribed to our channel and hit the bell so you won't miss any of our videos full of historical curiosities about ancient Rome. And speaking of beginnings, get ready to discover how Tetráites faced his first challenges on his journey to glory. The dark beginning and the first spark of fame. Amid the hustle and bustle of Pompeii, very few knew the true origins of Tetráites. Rumors said he might have been captured in some distant province of the empire, sold to a lanista, the trainer of gladiators, and forced to enter the arena. Others believed he was a free man who found himself in debt and discovered in the bloody profession his only way to survive. The fact is that in his early fights, Tetráites was barely noticed, just another gladiator trying to prove his worth. Despite the initial anonymity, his daring stance, fighting without a chest plate, began to catch the public's attention. From afar, it seemed crazy to expose oneself so much to enemy blows. However, for Tetráites, it meant agility and the chance to demonstrate unparalleled courage. This characteristic set him apart from other gladiators and, gradually, his name began to echo in the small circles of the most devoted spectators. The first combats were not easy, even with the advantage of having his arms and torso less encumbered by weight. Tetráites faced opponents with years of experience, heavy shields, and full armor. Some defeats did occur, but what was impressive was how he got up and kept fighting. With each new challenge, his technique improved, and more than that, his fan base grew in the stands. In one of these early battles, perhaps against a veteran, whose name is scarcely remembered, Tetráites endured long enough to exhaust his opponent. When the adversary was already gasping and out of strength, Tetráites ended the fight triumphantly. The amphitheater exploded with applause. From that moment, his name began to emerge from the shadows and circulate through the corridors, taverns, and murals of the city. And it is precisely in this buzz that we will discover how Tetráites' fame took over the streets and courtyards of Pompeii. Rumors spread through Pompeii. From the moment he defeated a more experienced opponent, Tetráites became one of the favorite topics in public baths and street corner conversations. The people of Pompeii loved gladiator stories, and the more courageous and unpredictable the fighter, the greater the interest. It wasn't long before children started playing Be Tetráites, imitating his bold moves and shouting his name in their street games. Vendors roaming around the amphitheater saw the opportunity to earn some extra coins, small amulets, counterfeit coins bearing the faces of gladiators, and even leather bands resembling the protective gear used by Tetráites began to be sold. It was a rudimentary but effective form of merchandising, and his popularity rose at the same pace. Meanwhile, the local elite, eager to cultivate high-quality spectacles, started betting large sums on Tetráites' fights. Some prominent patrons began to better finance his training, providing higher quality weapons and incentives for him to become an icon capable of attracting more spectators and consequently more money. However, this wave of fame came at a price. Tetráites became the target of envy among other gladiators who had been fighting longer and did not receive as much attention. Side glances in the backstage of the arena were not uncommon. For many, he was still seen as a lucky newcomer who needed to truly prove his worth. And it was in this atmosphere that the first mention of Prudes emerged, who would become Tetráites' next great challenge. But before we get to know Prudes in depth, we need to understand what made the Mirmillion style so special for Tetráites. The Mirmillion style and the radiance of courage. The Mirmillion fighting style was one of the most popular within gladiatorial spectacles, characterized mainly by a crested helmet, the large rectangular shield, and the use of a short sword. The Mirmillion symbolized the idealized Roman soldier. It was a style based on both offense and defense, balancing the protection of the shield with quick sword strikes. Tetráites stood out precisely by making this style even more aggressive. Without a chest plate, he left his torso free, allowing him to move with greater fluidity. This amazed his opponents, who could not fathom such daring. However, it was a constant risk. Any blocking failure could be fatal. The audience, however, loved this dramatic element. To master the Mirmillion style, Tetráites spent hours training with his lanista and the other gladiators in his group. The routine was grueling. Running to build endurance, exercises to strengthen his legs and arms, and repetitive practice of strikes to achieve precision. Every scar on his body was the result of this arduous training or of battles that ended more painfully. The discipline and dedication to the Mirmillion style not only impressed the public, but also began to attract the attention of powerful patricians, who saw in Tetráites the potential to generate even greater profits at major gladiatorial festivals. His name was even mentioned at important banquets, where the high echelons of Pompeii discussed politics, art, and, of course, their favorite gladiators. Then we reach the moment when these two titans cross paths. Get ready, because this rivalry would forever change the history of combats in Pompeii. The first encounter between Tetráites and Prudes. At first, the name Prudes appeared merely as another experienced competitor, but the rumor quickly spread that he was equally skilled and determined, with a history of fights that never went unnoticed. The few records suggested that Prudes had a more solid and defensive technique, valuing every step taken in the arena. The anticipation for the clash between the two grew immediately. All of Pompeii was talking about how the confrontation between Tetráites' reckless offensive courage and Prudes' calculated prudence would unfold. After all, if Tetráites attacked almost recklessly, the other was known for never striking. Without being sure he wouldn't suffer a mortal blow in return. Before the fight, both had to undergo intense training sessions supervised by their lanistas, who also took the opportunity to promote the spectacle of the century. Prudes, in his training sessions, showed an almost superhuman patience, waiting for the perfect moment to unleash each blow. Tetráites, on the other hand, further refined his speed and invested in the idea of confusing his enemy with unexpected movements. The date for the showdown was marked with great fanfare. The city walls were adorned with inscriptions heralding the fight of the year. Caravans came from other regions trying to secure a place in the stands, and even those not particularly interested in gladiatorial combats showed curiosity about the outcome. It was the perfect opportunity for Pompeii to profit and strengthen its reputation for offering some of the best spectacles in the entire Roman Empire. If you thought all that was intense, just wait to see how the fight itself unfolded. The fight that shook the arenas of Pompeii, The amphitheater of Pompeii was packed. Standing in the back rows were people from various social classes, free citizens, slaves, traveling merchants, and even representatives of wealthy families. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the appearance of Tetráites and Prudes in the arena. When they finally entered, the contrast was striking. Tetráites displayed his shield, helmet, and short sword, but his bare chest, ready for danger, was on full display. Prudes, on the other hand, wore a light cuirass, equally potent to protect him. The crowd erupted in cheers of encouragement and at the same time tension. A single misstep could bring anyone down. The first move came from Tetráites, who charged at Prudes, trying to unbalance him. Prudes skillfully blocked, counter-attacking with a blow that nearly hit Tetráites' shoulder. It was the kind of initial exchange that made the audience hold their breath. The entire arena seemed to pulsate with every step these two gladiators took. During the confrontation, there were moments when Tetráites nearly lost his balance, but his agility saved him. On the other side, Prudes appeared unshakable, analyzing every opening. The fight lasted longer than most combats, until Tetráites managed a decisive blow, striking Prudes' shield with enough force to leave him exposed and then knocking him down. The audience went wild. Tetráites emerged victorious, consolidating himself as the great gladiator of the moment. Have you ever wondered how this event shaped the destiny of an empire? Leave your like now, so we can keep bringing you stories as impactful as this. After such a fight, we can only imagine what happened next, right? Get ready to discover the extent of Tetráites' fame, unmissable recognition, and the repercussion throughout the empire. With the victory over Prudes, Tetráites not only earned local respect, but his name began to echo throughout the entire region of Campania. Rumors about the fight reached cities like Naples and Herculaneum, where merchants discussed the epic battle, and some bettors lamented not having witnessed it live. Local governors and Roman patrons saw an opportunity to promote even higher-level entertainment. Some even sent invitations for Tetráites to participate in larger festivals in other parts of the empire. After all, if he was capable of defeating someone as skilled as Prudes, perhaps he could deliver an even greater show in more prestigious arenas. The rumor of his courage also spread along trade routes. Travelers buying and selling goods in Pompeii carried Tetráites' name to distant regions, reaching places like Gaul, modern-day France, Britannia, England, and Pannonia, Hungary, where later glass vessels and inscriptions celebrating his victory were found. Meanwhile, Prudes did not vanish from the arena. Although defeated, he continued to be a respected gladiator, and some accounts even speak of a rematch that would occur in the near future. But at that moment, all the spotlight was on Tetráites, the great popular hero who defied death with his bare chest. And if a gladiator achieves unparalleled fame, what happens next? Let's discover how the quest for freedom became part of Tetráites' journey. The gates to freedom and the risks of fame. In Roman culture, there was a strong appeal for gladiatorial spectacles, but there was also a loophole. The victorious and acclaimed gladiator could, on rare occasions, win the famous rudis, a wooden sword symbolizing his liberation. This was the dream of many who fought in the arenas, and Tetráites, as he became a star, saw that possibility become more tangible. However, the prospect of freedom was not simple. More victories meant more popularity, and increased popularity attracted the attention of increasingly powerful patrons who, in turn, demanded continuous wins. Roman games were brutal and bloodthirsty. A single defeat could tarnish a gladiator's reputation, jeopardizing everything. Furthermore, fame also brought enemies. Behind the scenes, some bet fortunes on other gladiators and hoped for Tetráites' downfall. The fear that the public might get tired of a single champion was also real. And Tetráites himself knew freedom was within reach, but any misstep could cost him his life. In discreet conversations with his Lannister, Tetráites received promises of grander opportunities if he agreed to participate in festivals in other regions. The thought of further expanding his legend was tempting, but at the same time, the risk increased, for facing gladiators of imperial renown meant an unprecedented level of difficulty. Now that Tetráites dreams of freedom, it's worth reflecting. What price does society pay to promote this kind of spectacle? The cruelty of the games and the moral dilemmas. Gladiator fights were, without a doubt, the most popular form of entertainment in Rome. However, many Roman philosophers such as Seneca openly criticized this culture of violence. They argued that the constant practice of watching mortal battles corrupted the public's morality and trivialized human life. For Tetráites, every step inside the arena meant not only a personal challenge, but also participating in this cycle of life and death that entertained the masses. In moments of reflection, he might wonder if the price of his own freedom was worth sacrificing the lives of other men who were in the same situation, often fighting against their own will. External observers also recorded the duality of the Roman people. While they exalted the winners, they wept for the defeated or revolted against blatant injustices. But most of the time, the arena was a stage where the fate of the fighters was decided in minutes, without the audience caring too much about the spilled blood. This moral and social tension fueled the popularity of gladiators, for there was a sense of tragedy and heroism in every battle. And Tetráites, through his courageous stance, became an example of how a man could rise to legendary status, even with the shadow of death constantly looming over him. You must be wondering how this fame endured over time. Now let's explore the historical impact these two left for future generations. The legacy of Tetráites and Prudes throughout the empire. Tetráites and Prudes not only starred in a single fight, but in an entire chapter of Pompeii's gladiator culture, and that legacy endured thanks to the archaeological evidence found centuries later, such as inscriptions and graffiti on walls. In addition to glass vessels in distant regions of the empire, these remnants confirm how widely a gladiator's fame could spread. In a world without modern printing or communication technology, the news traveled along Roman roads through merchants, soldiers, travelers, and storytellers. Thus, Tetráites and Prudes entered the popular imagination of the ancient world. Other gladiators who came after were inspired by Tetráites' feats, adopting his chestless courage and trying to replicate the resounding success he achieved. Some fared well, others met their demise quickly, but all understood that if they wanted to leave their mark, they needed a courageous spirit and something that made them unique among so many competitors. The continuity of these stories shows that even long after the events, we still reflect on the fascination that the Roman Empire held in its arenas. Tetráites and Prudes became symbols of an era in which the quest for glory and freedom necessarily involved the risk of life. It is this duality that ensures their narratives still find space in our imagination. Now, in the final stretch, let's unveil the last rumors about what might have happened to Tetráites and how his legend lives on today. Rumors about the final fate of Tetráites and his impact on history. There are no definitive records of what happened to Tetráites after his meteoric rise. Some historians speculate that he might have continued fighting until he earned the rudies and lived in freedom, perhaps returning to his homeland if he was indeed from Pompeii or another province. Others believe that his fame accompanied him, but that he eventually fell in a grand arena in a larger city, possibly Rome or Carthage, where more dangerous fights took place before even larger crowds. This would explain the lack of concrete evidence regarding a peaceful retirement. In any case, his mark was immortalized. The artistic representations found prove that the name Tetráites became synonymous with courage and daring. And Prudes, although he lost the most famous fight, also earned his place in history as a respected gladiator whose duel with Tetráites was remembered for generations. The impact on modern studies of the Roman Empire and gladiator games is undeniable. Knowing these stories in detail helps us understand the mindset, culture, and values of the era, and it shows that even in such a distant past, there was room for popular heroes and legendary tales that transcend centuries. We have reached the end of this journey through the lives of Tetráites and Prudes, two gladiators who became symbols of courage and perseverance amidst the grand arenas of the Roman Empire. Their trajectories demonstrate how the pursuit of fame, the fight for freedom, and the moral tension of taking lives for entertainment were at the core of this practice so deeply rooted in Roman culture. If you enjoyed this journey through time and want more fascinating stories, subscribe to our channel, leave your like, and share this video with your friends. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video about ancient Rome and the Empire.